I hope the best. Okay. Anyway, the structure of this lecture, which is the topic of this lecture, we try to describe the history of evolution of world economic system. This history started in Europe and unfolded step by step under direction of different leading cities. The first one was Venice, the second one Antwerp, and the third one Genoa, the fourth one Amsterdam, and later London. Until the beginning of 20th century, the leading city, the guiding area, the core area located in Europe, and whole of global economy organized according to European standards. Majority, because this is obviously and officially, this is a course of Faculty of Economics, focused to the economic knowledges, economic disciplines. I try to draw somehow the background before the recent time, how unfolded and how globalized the European economy. The first chapter of this survey, long historical survey, definition of basic elementary concept of description of world economic system. We started this series of definition because in the rational cognition, very important define the elementary terms. Because if not define the elementary terms, we are not able to discuss about the same problems. Okay, jump back a little bit, sorry for that. We try to define, no, it's a little bit too speedy. We have to define, no, it's an exam. Later, okay, fundamental concept. In the last week, you can see on the YouTube channel how I try to define the concept of space from the point of view of history, geography, psychology, ecology. Different concept, different approach for the concept of space. We try to define the time. How we are able to describe the time, the concept of the time. And basically, jump a little bit, this is the speedy learning. We arrive to the concept of time. And we arrive to the definition of historical time. Basically, there are two approaches for the historical disciplinary description of time. The first one, linear, irreversible, and cumulative approach. Last week I spoke about, if somebody would like to notice information, watch it at the YouTube channel. The second one, the cycle. Describe the historical process, different length of cycle. For example, three types of the cycle: the kitchen cycle, 40 months, and Juglar is a French scholar described in the 19th century, in the 60s, 6 to 8 years long cycle, and the longest one, which are used in the frame of economics, this is the Kondratiev cycle. Somebody know the Nikolai Dmitrievich Kondratiev? Nobody knows? Russian student? It's an interesting history, because probably you know that academic life functions like a gerontocracy. You know which is the gerontocracy? This is the ruling of all people. Ruling of all people. And somebody know the term of creative destruction? Creative destruction. Creative destruction means some situation, some historical situation, the history not able unfold because there are institutional and personal barriers. And in this situation, activate the creative destruction introduced by Austrian scholar. His name is unfortunately on the table, but later I try to forecast the topic, but it's not easy because it's a free lecturing. I am not sure about which topic I will speak. It's a not well planned construction. Okay, about the Kondratiev. It's a good story and very similar story, for example, to the Andrei Navalny. You know the name of Navalny. And he was a very talented scholar, but no able to start the academic career because so many old people was in the ladder, academic ladder of Scientific Academy of Russia and the university and so and so. But appeared the Bolshevik Revolution. Half of leader of academic life killed and half emigrated. Opened the way, this is the creative destruction, opened the way for Kondratyev. He founded the first institution, academic institution, who analyzed long cycle in the history. At the beginning of 20th century, and founded an institution in St. Petersburg, which named on that time Leningrad, and published a lot of seminal studies about the long cycle of the history, or a long cycle of economy unfolded in the at the beginning of 20th century. But he was a very respected academical member, received a dacha, you know which is the dacha. It's a great building in Moscow. But one night, stopped a black car on the entrance of dacha. You know the story, how it continued. Transported to Siberia and killed. And Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin was a great bureaucrat. Personally signed each bureaucratic material of persecution. And for example, signed personally the sentence of death of Kondratyev. He died in Siberia and no any information. He became one of the most respected economics of the 20th century. Why? Because transported to Siberia, some years later started the deepest crisis of capitalist world between 29-33. And when started the crisis, and everybody realized it's not a short-term crisis, try to find who was able to forecast this crisis, and found the study of Kondratyev. Kondratyev forecasted that at the end of 20th we'll start a crisis. Quite typical Russian story, fortunately or unfortunately. Okay, good. And a historian reflected the concept of the cycle. And the first historian, a French historian, realized that if analyzed a historical process, for example, Ernst Labrus, a member of great French historical school named Annales School, Annales, a title of historical journal, analyzed the background of French Revolution and identified a 10 to 12 years long cycle on the time of 18th century before the French Revolution. Very interesting, the story of French Revolution. Before the French Revolution had 7 bad years. You know the biblical story. 7 thin and 7 thick cattle. It's a Christian Bible. This is the dream of Pharaoh. Dream of Pharaoh. And Moses was who solved the meaning of 7 thin and 7 thick cattle. What mean? 7 years long period, the longest one, which able to survive a traditional agrarian society. Why? Because no technology of conservation. Which is the longest one of conservation? Cheese, hard cheese, able to serve, which is the size. I spent half year in the Netherlands with scientific fellowship. And if somebody know the cheese fair, the cheese market, which is the size of a typical Dutch cheese, 1.5 meters. Why? Because this was the contemporary things necessary to be usable for a lot of years. And other things was animals. ate for example, cereals and converted, very high loss, converted cereals to meat. No other technology. But 7 years expired. And if you know the story, for example, recently very popular movie of Napoleon, started with the revolution, killed so many people. This was the contemporary joke, for example, in the French nobility. One French nobleman mentioned that we are like a potato. A French nobility like a potato. Why? Because the best one under the soil. Okay, it's very harsh, very cruel and very harsh. Why? Because so deep crisis before the French Revolution decreased the sensibility of the contemporaries. Okay, but turn back. Ernst Labrus was the first who identified a 10-12 years long cycle before the French Revolution. The second one, Fernand Braudel. About the Fernand Braudel, necessary to know one of the best or the best historian whole of the 20th century. It's quite rare. Why? Because the 20th century, this is the century of Anglo-Saxon science and scientists dominated whole of the global evolution of 20th century, mainly in the second half of the 20th century, evolution of disciplines, except history. In the case of history, the French school was the strongest one. And Fernand Braudel described and defined a new time concept. One of the most important innovations of his time concept was a secular cycle. Identify long cycle, longer one than the term of generation in the history. For example, this is the Braudel secular cycle. Braudel secular cycle. We can identify one cycle about the evolution of world economy. Okay, we can identify one cycle with help of. Okay, starting point. You can see it's the red one, like a sniper. It's. Okay, but I don't want to kill nobody. Okay, sniper, not sniper. Starting point, turning point, and closing point. We can describe one cycle with the information of starting, turning, and closing point. Look at the first cycle of European and the global history. The starting point, the middle of the 13th century. Why so important? Because in the 13th century, economic evolution started the critical point that the European economy was able to produce a surplus in the trade necessary to produce a surplus. Lot of free places in the first row, not so popular. Okay, this is the normal reaction. In the last week, last lecture I spoke about that education, basic education of European student and the pupil, it's a survival. And which is the most safe place in the lecture, the last row. Okay, but I crying, everybody able to listen. Okay, the starting point when European economy became so developed that able to produce surplus, and there is a reason for changing the surplus, changing the products, changing production of European economy. The turning point, the middle of 14th century, 1 century later, then start the economic integration. Why? Because this is the area, this is the decade of Black Death. Somebody listened about the Black Death? Yes. Black Death, a plague, a bacterial infection, which killed 40%, more than 1/3 of European population. Estimate European population 90 million, and 40 million expired for 1 decade. No similar humanitarian catastrophe even in the European history. No comparable. But very interesting, and I call your attention, it's not only a problem, it's a challenge. The modernization of Europe started from this crisis. The feudal structure is down, and the regional economic integration and centralization of state started after the crisis. Because on the time of crisis increased the pressure for economic institutions, for local communities, and very high the danger, very high the odds find the good answer for the challenge. And European integration, European special way in global comparison started with the Black Death. Before the Black Death, in the global world rank list, Europe was on the 4th. The first one, China. The second one, India. And the third one, a Muslim world. Before the crisis, Europe only the 4th. And found good answer for this crisis. Okay, this is the turning point. Beginning of 16th century, this is the dawn of geographical discoveries. Started geographical discoveries on the coastal area of Africa via Atlantic Ocean to the direction of New World, and opened the maritime trade for Europeans, and started step by step integrate the world. And very interesting question. It's possible in the last week I spoke about yet, which is the most important, the material world around us or our thought. Obviously, the world inside on our brain much more important. And a geographical discovery is very far. When Europeans appeared on the Central Americas, appeared in the small island of Atlantic Ocean, destroyed everything, and reconstructed the world left behind them. In Iberian Peninsula, agriculture and the buildings and the local custom, everything. Most developed agrarian construction in Americas destroyed until the ruins. Why? Because it's not familiar with them. Wasn't able to use this more developed culture, destroyed and introduced the more underdeveloped construction came from Europe. Europeans had two great advantages compared with the local culture in Africa, local culture in Americas. The first one, knowledges of sailing, and the firearms. No any other, only knowledges of sailing, navigation, so and so, and the firearms. No any others. India, very interesting. You come from Bangladesh. Okay, you are. Bangladesh, Bengalia was the older name. Until the beginning, it's reconstructed the GDP, gross national products. Until the end of 19th century, the most developed region, whole of the world, Bengalia was. Why? Because it's alluvial plain area. Ganges and Brahmaputra came from Himalaya, and very, very efficient agriculture unfolded in this plain area. More developed, higher one, for example, GDP compared with England or British Isle, more developed. But recently, changed the world, and importance of agrarian activity down. Recently, in the developed country, the population who are working in agriculture under 3%. And the proportion of GDP came from agriculture, it's 3-4%. Therefore, if the paradigm, the construction of the word changed. Some area is down, but before, Bengalia was the most developed area, whole of the world. Okay. So, this is the closing date. Look at the second cycle. The second cycle starts when the first one closed, and the turning point is the middle of 17th century. Why so important? Because this is the age of decline of Mediterranean economy, a Mediterranean world, and in consequence of great geographical discoveries up the Atlantic Ocean, and the coastal area of North Sea and the Atlantic Ocean, and Mediterranean area, which was the richest one in the Middle Ages. It's down. And the closing date is the middle of 18th century. Why so important? Because this is the dawn of Industrial Revolution and birth of nationalism. Why so important? Because before the turning area of 18th and 19th century, which is the most important ruling force of formation of the state, not the nation.
Religion?
Partly.
Ruling lineages and dynasties.
Dynasty. The majority of countries, empire. There is a Mongolian student in the audience. No Mongolians, but time by time there are Mongolian students. Quite a strange, because I live together in the student hostel with Mongolian student. I don't know why, but Mongolian student was and recently are able to learn Hungarian language without accent. I don't know why. Because the language and the language connection very far from, for example, I live together with Vietnamese, but so difficult for them learning the Hungarian. But Mongolian, I was very surprised, without accent, was able. Look at the Mongolian history. In the Mongolian history, empire of Genghis Khan, largest empire, whole of the human history, largest one compared with the British Empire. But it wasn't an empire of Mongolians, the Mongolian soldier. No, it was an empire of the dynasty of Genghis. And very interesting, so important in the Mongolian history, the family of Genghis, dynasty of Genghis, that even in the communist area, the first secretary of the Communist Party tried to construct in artificial manner a connection to the dynasty of Genghis, because it's enforced the political position. Not only elected leader of Communist Party, but even connected to the dynasty of Genghis. Okay, turn back. For example, you mentioned religion. It's important. It's very important. It's a usable indicator why kill each other, the people. One reason was the dynasty, religion, for example. A lot of war, for example, Reformation, Counter-Reformation, and very interesting, so deep, this rupture, for example, in the Christendom. If foreign student may be strange. In the Christendom, there are a lot of fraction. For example, Roman Catholic fraction, Orthodox fraction, Calvinist fraction is a Counter-Reformation, and a lot of different customs. And the people killed each other on the time of Reformation and Counter-Reformation. And everybody believed walking to the heaven. If somebody died on the saving of good religion. And I am Calvinist, by the way. It came from the eastern part of Hungary. I receive in the pocket of my environment and familiar connection. And it was very interesting that I have a girlfriend, it's a Catholic. And I was very surprised. I traveled at home and told to my mother that I have a girlfriend And the first question of her was, which religion? I told the Catholic, it's not good, not good. It's very interesting how survive, but in my age, it's not a conflict. Nobody would like to kill each other for the connection to the different fraction. Okay, religion maybe, but much more important, the social status. Nobility, citizenry, or peasantry. This is the most important. If somebody, for example, was nobleman in Croatia, for example, like Zrini, for Hungarian student it means a lot, was a nobleman in Hungary, or Romanian student. For example, one of the greatest family of one of the greatest king, Matthias, came from Romanian Principality, Havasalföld, moved to Hungary, but the same social status. Was a nobleman in Havasalföld, in Transylvania too. Therefore, this converted in the frame of Europe. Therefore, the most important rupture which divided the society was a social status. Language not so important. Language not so important. The language and the common culture became important only after the French Revolution. And it's, to my mind, because I'm a historian, and I try to understand the historical process. Therefore, switch out the emotion. To me, it's quite easy. Some of my friends told to me I have a Asperger syndrome. It's possible, no. But mean it's not sensible for the emotional communication. Advantage or disadvantage. But if switch out the emotion, a common language and a common identity help a lot large regions integration, because the people help to each other, no any personal connection, and unfolded a solidarity for unknown people on the base of common language and common culture. At the beginning wasn't a common language. Why? Because there are a lot of dialects. A lot of dialects. For example, I speak the Hungarian language when I was a young child with local dialect. But I walked to the elementary school and told to me, it's not good. It's not good. I speak like a peasant. And trained to me for the official literary dialect. Therefore, on the frame of nation, making the common language is an artificial construction. Because in the normal situation, everybody in local places spoke the local dialects. The distance much larger. Somebody lived in Germany. In Germany, nobody lived in Germany. Germany, unbelievable. If somebody came from the northern part of Germany to Munich, for example, I spent 1.5 years in Munich with other fellowship, not able to communicate. A little bit the same situation. For example, if somebody traveled to recent Slovakia, it was a part in the empire period to the Hungarian kingdom, saved the local dialects, and sometimes I wasn't able to understand the communication because spoke a local dialect. Okay, unified the language, the common language, and unified with help of school, education and the military service. Somebody perform military service? Nobody. Yeah, but this is the prison experience. Prison experience. Nobody would like to go under flag. But one of the best part of my experience I picked during my military service. Army unify and assimilate. For example, on the empire period, the ordering language was the official language of the empire. In the case of France, unified with help of bureaucracy and with help of army, crowd army. because half of France under River Loire, nobody knew in French. Spoke a local dialects, Oc, Provençal, and Occitan, and a different local language. New Latin language, but not French, and unified. Okay, turn back to the story. The closing date, the starting period of industrial revolution, and starting period toward a nationalism and the national state. Look at the third cycle. If somebody would like to eat and drink, it's a free. I am drinking. Cheers for you. Because it's quite late and somehow necessary to survive. Okay, the starting date is the same like a closing date of the second cycle. The turning point is the closing period of Napoleonic Wars. Because this is the starting point of formation of national state, the starting point of formation of global economy. This is the starting point of traffic revolution of traffic. For example, global sailing system, railway network, and so and so. It's a economic integration of the world, and the closing date is the middle of last decade of 19th century. Why? Because this was the last peaceful decade. At the beginning of 20th century started local wars in northern part of Africa and Balkanian Peninsula, and this was the slope toward the first world economy. And this was the last peaceful decade. And the last, which defined by Fernand Rodot, the starting date is the same, and the turning date is the middle of 70s of the 20th century. Why? Because after Second World War started the greatest economic recovery whole of the human history. Look at, for example, trajectory of population. Population of human, it's possible, in the last week I spoke about, 70,000 years ago in Africa was 5,000 member. Humankind was on very near to the extinction, very near, 5,000. It was a great volcano eruption at Toba. Somebody listened about a Toba volcano. It was a mega catastrophe and a great disaster, humanitarian disaster unfolded. The drought, basically the drought destroyed the vegetation, destroyed the animals, and almost destroyed whole of the humankind. 5,000. At the beginning of Christian calendar, official birthday of Jesus Christ, estimate the population of global population 200 or 300 million. At the beginning of 19th century, reached 1 million, or according to American English, billion. We are used the British English much better for avoid misunderstanding. At the beginning of 19th century, 1 million. At the end of Second World War, 2.5 million. At the end of 20th century, 6 million. You look at the jump. Look at the jump. Half century jump from 2.5 million to 6 million. And recently estimate the global population to 8 billion. Okay. And this is the turning point. And if true, the conclusion of Fernand Rodot, we are in downturn in global economy. But if possible, you remember in the last lecture, on the case of last lecture, I spoke about the weaknesses of rational cognition. We have opened a small window that it's possible not true, but very probable. The science able to declare only probability, no final cognition on this way. But according to conclusion of Fernand Rodel, recently we are in the global downturn. Okay, but, okay, if we are looking at history, elementary historical event, very useful to apply, very useful to apply a concept of Fernand Rodel. Fernand Rodel divided a different time dimension of history. The first one, a short term. Some days, some weeks, some months, less than 1 year's long term. For example, we are performed this course on the time dimension of short term, because half year everybody expire, not expire, but perform well the exam. For newcomers, written exam had to write at the end of this course. Each of question, expected question, I will load up to the course space, and I will load up a handbook about this course, and I want more information which I tell in the frame of lecture. Okay, if somebody not clear something, personal consultation is possible. Okay, but turn back. Short term. This is the short term. Starting and closing less than 1 year. The second one, temps de conjoncture, the French term, a middle term. It's less than 10 years. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. For example, closing your university studies, optimal situation, you will perform on the time dimension, temps de conjoncture, in the middle term. And finally, this is the long term, longue durée. It's a special term, generally used. A long term mean, like I try to demonstrate on the case of evolution, secular cycles of world economy. It's long one. Why so important for us? Because each generation, if we jump back to the secular cycle, living in different phases of the long cycle. Therefore, a generation who are able living through only small term of this long cycle define the normality. The normality according to phase of global cycle. If living a great recovery, a luxury consummation is the normal. For example, I came from the before the digital period, before the not the computer, before the television. During my childhood, was one or two, but generally nobody had television. Therefore, the people communicate personally one to other. And for example, my grandfather generation participated in the First World War. My father and the brother and the friend of my father participated in Second World War. And the people killing each other, it was a normality. And for example, told, because this was a psychological repetition of the trauma and the experiences, and told a lot of times, the stories killing each other. Because this was the normality. The largest mammal who I killed, not personally but participated in the killing, was a pig. In the rural area, everybody had a friends beside the buildings and killed day by day, not year by year, because there is a causality between the sausages and the pigs, unfortunately. This is the rural area. And very interesting, in Europe, for example, according to cooking, there are a region. We are living in the continental area. This is the region of the pigs. It's not me, but it's animals, and using for cooking a grass. For example, Mediterranean area, the elementary material for the cooking, oil, olive oil. In the northern part of Europe, the butter. Regional peculiarity are in the cooking and the domesticated animals, agriculture, and so on. And so. Okay, I turn back to the story. Therefore, very important, great cycle, long durée, long term, because the people define the normality according to phases when living in the long term, long structure changes of global economy. Okay, but if we are looking the history in large terms, we can define at least 3 historical events, which are linear, it's one trajectory follow, irreversible, one way only into the direction of future, and cumulative, it's accumulate. The green line demonstrates linear, it's a trajectory of exponential trajectory of processes. The first one, world population. If we are looking, you remember the trajectory, 5,200 or 300 million, 1 million, 2.5 million, 6 and 8 million. But I have to call attention, it's not endless exponential growth, but will stop in consequence of modernization. If somebody interested for, I can speak about, but the modernization will stop population growth approximately around between 12 or 60 million, according to prediction, demographical prediction. The second one, energy per capita. If we are looking at the beginning of human evolution, each human used only somatical, energetical background, it's a muscles, no more, only the muscle. In consequence of agrarian revolution, and innovation of agriculture, appeared the domesticated animals and drove powers, horses, cattle, and camel, and so and so. Domesticated animal and the simple engines like a water mill, windmills. It's very simple, but very important. Call your attention that even until the Industrial Revolution, 70% of energy, it's possible in the last week I spoke about, I remember, 70% of energy was muscle of humans. For example, this was one reason of great survival of slavery. Which area was the typical area of slavery? Low density of population area. Americas and Russia. Holop, you know this term, holop. It's a slave. Why is so important in Russia? Because large area, low density of population. And 1/3 of peasantry were slave. No free decision about his and her life. And same situation in the case of Americas. Which part of the United States? Southern part. Low density of population. And when expired the slavery and prohibited the slavery, after Napoleonic Wars, officially 1850, on the Great Peace Treaty in Vienna, which closed the Napoleonic Wars. Why? Because started Industrial Revolution, activated the fossil fuels, coal, later oil, gas, and nuclear power, and not so high importance, not useful, apply the slavery. Because applied the engines, applied it's electricized and applied the combustive engine and the more developed technology, and expire the importance of personal power of slaves. Not by chance, in United States, which was the great and the last great war beside or in front of the slavery, the Civil War in 60s of 19th century. Okay, energy per capita. And the last consequence of great exponential growth of energy per capita, the human capacity recently in the 21st century, same like a geological forces. The human able activate so high level of geological energy, like for example a volcano, like an earthquake, like a cyclone in the atmosphere. Therefore, a human in geological dimension was the same league with, for example, with the elephant or hippopotamus before the Industrial Revolution, step up, and recently we are playing in the same league with earthquake and volcanoes. Okay, and the last one, information. Very important to realize that beside the biological evolution had a cultural evolution. It's one of the most important advantages of humankind compared with the rival animals. Able passing information, not necessary to invent the hot water to each generation, necessary passing information, generation by generation. The next step, the invention of writing, because increase the quantity of information. For example, you know the Celtic religion, the priest of Celtic religion, the Druids, you know the story. Recently very popular, a lot of series and movies made from the Celtic background. And religion, the Celtic religion, no written version. When killed the last Druids, expired. Each Druid had to learn each information. Okay, next step is innovation of writing, innovation of printing, invented in different parts, in Korea, in China, in Europe. A German guy was the great inventor, Gutenberg. And recently, electronic internet surface, everybody possible to publish everything. Increase the information exponential trajectory. Good. Look at the world economy system. We are over the space, over the time. Look at how appeared the cognition and the concept about the formation of world economy system. Okay, very important. It's possible. In the last week, I spoke about that if we are following the history of disciplines, geography, chemistry, physics, mathematics, history, each generation had a great question. A lot of small questions, but one great question. When a history appeared, in Europe anyway, in the 19th century, the great question was, how appeared a national state? And describe the history of Hungarians, Germans, French, Dutch, everything. 5 volume, 10 volume, that which is the history and the background of national state. Which were the most important disciplines of history, political history, legal history, military history. But these are a 19th century's question. The next great question was the formation of global economy. When appeared, for example, the cycle conception with Nikolai Dmitrievich Kondratiev, Juglar, Kitchin, and any other people. This is the beginning of 20th century. When appeared and globalized the world, appeared the stock of exchanges, great transport network and traffic network, and not only for the high society globalized the world. For example, after the COVID-19, a little bit more complicated. Before the COVID-19, if somebody would like to travel from Budapest to London, it was 20,000 forint. It's less than, a little bit more than 50 euros. 50 euros. That's, for everybody almost, it was feasible. But economic history, importance of economic activity became so visual, so global, that at the beginning of 20th century started and focused on, this was the big question. How formed the global economy? The next question, social history. When appeared some mass society in the 20th and the 30s, the historian tried to understand how function a democracy and how function the dictatorship. We are the social background of that. We are the social background of that. For example, one Hungarian psychologist, I asked for Hungarian students. Somebody know the name of Ferenc Mérei? Sorry, change to Hungarians for. Mérei Ferencet ismeri valaki? No. Okay. One of the greatest, I suggest to you because he wrote a very seminal book about psychology of child. Until now, using this handbook about the psychology of child, published in the middle of 20th century. He was a Jew. To be a Jew during the 20th century wasn't an easy survival condition, but somehow he survived. Majority of his relatives died, but he survived. And as psychologists, try to understand which was the reason. Who is responsible for the cruelty of Nazis and cruelty of Germans? And organize experiments in kindergarten. The question was, because if somebody make a scientific experiment, necessary to define a clear question. We start with the question. And the question of Mérei was, who will the leader in the kindergarten? Everybody visited in kindergarten? Everybody? You know, I suppose you are memories about the kindergarten. I was a peripheral guy in the kindergarten. I stand on the fence and didn't communicate with nobody. Okay. My mother was very nervous because I visited regularly on the stable and spoke a lot with the cattle and the horses. 1-2 hours. Okay, but it's my mental problems. Turn to your situation, but there is an evolution because recently, speaking for you, for students, for humans, it's a stepping up a little bit. Okay, but turn back to the story. Look at the Mérei. Mérei visited to kindergarten, and the question was, who will leader in the community of children? Not the strongest one, because the other pupil able form a coalition and beating the strongest one. Not the highest intellectual capacity, because too clever people quite frequently disdain the others. I am in a good position because the people who don't know my profession thought about me that I'm a security guard. Nobody thinking that I am intellectual job. My solution for my judging to not a bodyguard, it's much lower, security guard. Because I'm a larger one. In peasant work, it's increased the size of the body. And my mother bred pigs, a lot of pigs. And no racial prejudice applied the same technology in my case, like function in the case of prejudice. In the case of pigs. And moreover, I'm not an intellectual face. It's quite strong, quite large. And the third reason that nobody knows about my intellectual job, that Hungary, a little bit feudal society. The high social position communicate down. But I came a peasant community, therefore I'm not able to communicate down, only the same level. In Western Europe never was a problem from that. Okay, but turn back to the question of Mérei. Who will the leader? Not the cleverest one, not the strongest one, the people who are monitoring the environment and realize one of child able to playing with doll and ordering, I order to you playing with dolls. And this girl will follow the leader. And for other people who would like to construct a sandy buildings, order to, therefore, the political leader forming even in the kindergarten. If you will, child or children, look at the social dynamics of the kindergarten. And the basic question was that the German, the folks, was or wasn't responsible for the sins of the Second World War. And the conclusion, yes. Yes. Because somehow, in psychological level, had a call, had an openness for these deeds. Okay, I turn back to the story. Appeared a social history. The next one, system of mentality. Because behavior of humans follow the social codes. Social codes. For example, there are Muslim students on the audience. Okay, very interesting because no veil, nobody wear a veil. But if there is a Muslim girl with veil, every time I tell to her, generation of my mother never left the building without veil. Therefore the veil somehow in Hungarian, even the Hungarian society, this is the direct declaration of traditional mentality. Never, never. And the generation of my mother never left. And the male without hat. Therefore, no closed cloth without veil or hat. Mentality very important, which is the normal behavior and which is not a normal behavior. Okay? And finally, appear ecological concept, not only in the, because ecology in the 19th century was a sub-discipline of biology, but in the 60s and 70s became ecology a global through wave and transformed almost each of the disciplines. Appeared environmental history, appeared environmental ecology, environmental psychology, ecological psychology, ecological economics. Therefore, ecology became a global thought, global thinking somehow. And in the field of history, it's mean two elementary information and activated two important aspects. The third one, a physical environment in the history changed a lot of times. In short term, volcano eruption, for example, middle term, for example, drought, and the long term, look at the global warming in the recent time. Therefore, environment, actor of history, as Napoleon, as Stalin, as Imhotep in old dynasty of Egypt, it's actor. Third. The second one, we are animals. It's possible you are not animals, but I am animal. Animal. Very frequently. Look at one story, because in the history, in the science, very important the verification. I declared I am animal, necessary to verify. For example, I spent quite a lot of times, more than 10 years, in student hostel. I left my village, I was 14 years old, in the secondary school, in the military service, very special student hostel, later in university student hostel, later I lived in Czechia, Czech Republic, the Netherlands, Switzerland, France, Germany, academic life. Like, for example, a Franciscan monks. There are monasteries everywhere, but this is academic life. I live at different places. And when I lived in Szeged, at the University of Szeged, in Herman Otto student hostel. Somebody living in Herman Otto student hostel? In which floor?
On the
Fifth? I lived in the fifth floor, similarly. 506 was the number of my room. I lived together with mathematicians, generally, and I woke up one night and no meals in the room. It happened, similar situation in your life? No meals? No. In my life, a lot of times. I woke up, I was very hungry, and the respect of private property not so high in the student hostel, not so high. Therefore, I decided that walk to the refrigerator, to the frigo, open, and I ate, which I find. I opened, but in the frigo had only two things, one lamp and small piece of butter. For short hesitation, I ate the butter. It wasn't a bad decision because validity date expired. Therefore, the last part of the night which I spent, I tried to avoid vomit to the pillow because it was very bad. Okay, I behave like an omnivore, like an animal. I had a biological needs. During my long life, I had a lot of other critical biological needs, but I would like to speak about my hungriness. Okay, therefore, two important elementary ecological information are physical environment able forming human history, first. Secondly, we are animals. And bearer of culture, time by time. Personally dependent proportion, which is more or less. Okay, and if we are looking at the history, evolution of history, the big question changed. And recently, for example, in the United States, 10% of historians specialized to environmental history. In Hungary, 1%. Very easy to decide which are the core area, which are the semi-peripheral area, and which are the peripheral area. Good. Look at the next step. Okay, some words about the first generation of Anna. It's John. Very important innovation of first generation of Anna was the introduction of Histoire Totale, total history. Total history means everything. It's a subject of historical research. For example, even the spitting. You know which is the reason of the spitting. There are something it's inside of the mouth necessary to clean. For example, in older Asian behavior, it was a spitting bowl for this solution. Spit into the bottle. Luxury, it's much precious material, and for example, in the lowest rank of society, it's a wooden material. It's a spitting bowl. In European custom, European standards, behavior took under taboo. If somebody had a problem inside of the mouth, take a handkerchief and find a dark corner, somehow clean. Therefore, everything, cleaning the mouth, spitting, for example, cleaning the nose, and for example, the clothing, even the subject of history. Why so important? It's possible in the last week I spoke about, walking to the for example, folkloric museum. Look at the doll, faceless doll. If looking the cloth on the faceless doll, you are able to judge this cloth came which part of the world, who wear came from which social status, age, and the marital status. Therefore, the cloth was a social code. If somebody approach on the Vogue side, everybody know who are approaching. Because the cloth is a traditional society, a social code. If I am looking you, you have an unfounded imagination. We are individuals. And we are wearing the clothes which demonstrate our personality. But if I am looking you, there are three types, three marketing types of the clothes. Because we are not under a traditional pressure, we are under the marketing pressure and the pressure of our budget. Okay, histoire totale. I spoke about the longue durée. Yeah? Okay, Fernand Braudel, third generation. Okay, the first person who described the term of global economy was an American scholar. American scholar, his name, Immanuel Wallerstein. He died 2 years ago. It's, I don't know, 96 or 97 years old. And his career, it's quite typical. He graduated in the New York University, but in the United States, he wasn't able to find a job. It's critical. I remember first 10 years of my career, I had no real job. I traveled to different countries with fellowship. I tried to overlapping different fellowship, maximizing the income, but it was quite, at the beginning of career, not so easy to start. And Immanuel Wallerstein, because no job in the United States, traveled to Africa and participated some local recovery and economic helping programs, and participated in different countries and without real success, and spent 10 years in Africa without success and tried to find answer, which is the reason of the failing, of the phase of recovery program. And the final solution of him was that the weakness of African countries came from the history. Basically from the age of geographical discoveries. Why? Later I will speak about this problem more detailed form, but it's a short version. When Europeans arrived to Africa, the Bay Guiana, which had three names: Bay of Ivory, Golden Bay, and Slaving Bay, slaves. Why? Because these were the most important products imported to Europe from Africa: ivory, slaves, and the gold. How? Didn't try to conquering whole of Africa. Why? Because the African population lived in the Iron Age, had efficient weapons. Compared with the American societies, Aztec Empire, Inca Empire, Mochica Empire, lived in Copper Age. Copper Age. No efficient arms against the Europeans, but in Africa had. Which was the strategy of European toward African countries? Distributed huge quantity of muskets. You know which is the rifle, muskets, contemporary muskets. But the local African countries didn't know only two operations: making gunpowder and making bullets. Therefore, connected to the change to the chain of trade via distribution of muskets. First. Secondly, introduced a new form of state to Africa. This is the state of warlords. You know which is the warlords. Okay, opening a parenthesis, I will continue this trajectory. Somebody know which kind of the ruling are in the history? Nobody knows. There is a traditional ruling. A traditional ruling means that father and the grandfather was a king, therefore the grandson it's a dynasty. It's a traditional logic. Traditional logic. It's very strong, for example, in Europe. Napoleon, probably you know the movie of Napoleon. Napoleon wasn't able stepping into the row of dynasty because he came from the underclass. He won 90% of battle, but the dynasty, the word of dynasty, didn't accept. Never. The traditional ruling, maybe the people are king who father, grandfather was a king. This is the logic of dynastical thinking. Look at, for example, Hungarian history. The greatest Hungarian king, Matthias, came from underclass, similarly, and would like to be a real king, similar, successful like a Napoleon in Central Europe, and try to solve the problem, not a member, any dynasty, invented an intellectual from Italy. His name was Antonio Bonfini. And asked him, create to me a background. Great ancestors. Antonio Bonfini had a great author, wrote down the history of family of Matthias back to the Julius Caesar. Nobody believed. Therefore, the son of Matthias, who wasn't so talented than King Matthias, wasn't able to continue the dynasty. Okay, this is one form of ruling, a traditional ruling. The second ruling form, a rational ruling. Ruling of law. In the modern society, officially, everybody under the legal system. Not the people directing the world, but the legal system ruling the world. This is the second. And the third form of ruling, based to the charisma. You know which is the charisma? The personal power. The personal, I don't know the better word, personal mental radiation. Look at, for example, Alexander the Great in the Antiquity, Napoleon in the Second World War. Second World War was a Hitler, Adolf Hitler. It's a charisma, it's personal power. And it's very dangerous if somebody bases the power to the personal power, personal intellectual capacity. Because the closest environment, imagine, like a god. Not by chance in Roman Empire, in the late Roman Empire, look at the emperor like a god. In the charisma, mean this is unbelievable, which can perform. And somebody know your name? Somebody? Okay, good. Because for the newcomers, I read a list of participants each of lecture, not mandatory participating, but if somebody more or less participate, I take into consideration. Okay. It's not a blackmail. Okay, turn back to the story. It's based on the charisma. And in the African history, proliferated a charisma-based form of the state, which no chance for evolution. In the traditional society, traditional ruling power, ruling form, there is a chance of evolution. In legal system, in the modern times, there is a chance of evolution. But the warlords killed each other, and no evolution. Moreover, for maximizing the profit, slave, gold and ivory, continuously slowed down to continuous warfare, and destroyed the great continental empire, Zimbabwe, for example, which located in the southern part of African continent, destroyed the Sudan. Sudan, this is the greatest civilization was in Africa. This is the meeting point between the nomads of the Sahara Desert and the settled down population. Sudan, it's one of the, recently, this is the darkest corner of the world for civil war and any other. But historically, this was a great empire. This continental area destroyed the warlords. Therefore, the Europeans, not for only the slavery, destroyed the chance of African evolution, but like a virus, load down some construction of the state which wasn't able to make any kind of evolution. Therefore, Immanuel Wallerstein realized that the problem of the African countries and the African continents is half thousand years long problem. It's very deep roots are in the problem, and basically we can describe and we can understand from the consequence of great geographical discoveries. Okay, the first one. The second one, sorry. The second one, 2 years later, in English historical journal, Past and Present, Brenner and Robert Brenner published very seminal studies about the capitalistic roots of medieval agrarian economy. It's a deep problem, deep and old problem, that European historian wasn't able to accept that capitalism unfolded in Europe. Why? Look at the medieval rank list of virtue. Who is the best one according to mentality of noblemen and nobility? The brave, cruel, and the good warriors. And which is the highest value? The prestige of family. And look at the capitalism, which is the good behavior and the good virtue, rational decision and maximizing of profit. Therefore, in the European history, discussed a lot about the roots of capitalism. And, for example, Werner Sombart, it's a German historian, for example, formed the concept, which adopted by Nazis, that it's implemented by foreign people. Who are the foreign people? Who wasn't and didn't live according to under the local value system? This most popular foreign of medieval Europe are Jews, and the second one are Muslims, mainly in the Mediterranean area, and the Armenians. It's a Christian community, came from Asia and the Near East. Therefore, this was a very important and seminal studies which verified it's not true. Capitalism and the technology and the trading technology of capitalism even appeared in the Middle Ages. And 1 year later, published a very important seminal books about the proto-industrialization. Proto-industrialization means that somebody had a peasant background. Somebody came from the peasant family. No? More or less. Recently, it's very tiny part of the modern society. But if you, for example, you read fairy tales You imagine that the peasants, it's working. It's not true. A peasant life, a lot of free times. A lot of free times. Why? Look at, for example, the wheat cereals, wheat. If you travel, for example, by train and look in the table of wheat, nobody. It's growing alone. Only two critical periods. Plowing and sowing in October and harvesting in late June or July or August. 4 peasants had a lot of free times and used for industrial activities. A trader, for example, would like to maximize the profit and brought devices for peasants. And a peasant on the free time make, for example, clothes and shoes and everything for free times. And it was quite a popular, a proto-industrial, a rural industrialization. And when in England started an industrial revolution, not a peasant traveled to the Manchester, Edinburgh, and other industrial cities. Partly trained peasants who participated in the proto-industrialization. Time almost expired. I ask your patience before I read the list of participants, and your patience because my spelling is tragical. But if somebody listening, his or her name or something similar, raise the hand, I ask you.